Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Joining us today are Ms. Donna Howe, Speaker Mike Johnson's office, Ms. Tommy Seaton, Senator Bill Cassidy's office, Mr. Logan Morris, Civilian Aide to the Secretary of the Army, Secretary Charlton McGinley, Louisiana Department of Veteran Affairs, Mayor Keith Lewing of Anacoco, Mayor Carolyn Todd of Nulano, Mayor Vicki Staniford of Simpson, Mayor Don Duvall of Rose Pine, Mr. Philip Hunt, Mayor Pro Temp of Leesville, and other distinguished guests. On behalf of Brigadier General Jason A. Curl, Commander of the Joint Readiness Training Center in Fort Johnson, and Command Sergeant Major Horatio Pena, welcome to the 2025 Memorial Day Ceremony. At this time, please stand for the invocation given by Installation Chaplain Michael Jeffries and the playing of our national anthem.
I invite you to join me in prayer this morning. Heavenly Father, we pause this morning to honor our fallen and to hold faithfully our promise to them and their families that their sacrifice will never be forgotten or taken for granted. To remember the ones that are unknown but are known to you, or may be missing in action or prisoner of war. We stand here in the presence of these monuments so that we remember those who have gone before us and be strengthened in our resolve to face adversity, to endure and secure for others the liberties and freedoms of our nation's ideals. We are reminded in sacred texts that greater love has no one than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends. Those who we remember today did exactly that. Lord, take our efforts to honor them and their families and magnify it so it is worthy of their sacrifice that they have made for us. With highest honor and gratitude, we say amen.
Please be seated. The traditional rendering of honors to Americans' fallen heroes consists of a 21-gun salute and raising the national colors from half to full staff. In addition, the playing of taps serves to further honor those who have freely given their lives in the defense of our nation and help liberate and ensure the continuing freedom of millions of people around the world. This ceremony is significant as thousands of American servicemen and women are still deployed in harm's way at stations around the globe. Our hearts and prayers go out to these soldiers and their families. Their sacrifices are nothing new for the United States military. In major wars and numerous conflicts throughout the world, on land, sea, and in the air, Americans in uniform have made untold sacrifices for this country. The global war of terrorism monument before you honors the service members, families, and civilians whose support and sacrifice will forever be remembered. The monument's North Tower honors active duty, reserve, and National Guard service members who were assigned or attached to units here at the Joint Readiness Training Center and Fort Johnson, or were mobilized here, deployed, and lost their lives. The South Tower catalogs active duty tenant units, National Guard and Reserve units that deployed from the Joint Readiness Training Center and Fort Johnson in support of overseas contingency operations since September 11th, 2001. We would like to recognize the families attending today who have lost loved ones in service to our nation. Will the Gold Star families please remain seated as everyone else stands? Please join us in a round of applause for these Gold Star families. We thank you and may God bless you for your sacrifice and service to our nation. Please be seated. At this time, Brigadier General Curl and Sergeant Major Baxter will lay the installation memorial wreath. They are assisted by a Sergeant First Class Trakinia Johnson, a Sergeant Audie Murphy member. This wreath represents all of our nation's fallen heroes from 1775 to the present. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today's ceremony. Please give a warm welcome to the commander of the Joint Readiness Training Center and Fort Johnson, Brigadier General Jason Curl.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending today's special ceremony. We gather today with solemn hearts and a shared purpose: to remember and honor the brave men and women who have made the ultimate sacrifice in service of our country. Memorial Day is a sacred occasion, a time to reflect on the profound courage and selflessness of those who have laid down their lives to protect the freedoms we hold dear. First observed after the Civil War, Memorial Day was initially called Decoration Day because families gathered to remember their loved ones by decorating grave sites with flowers or flags. It is a tradition that continues across the United States today. This weekend is not about cookouts, travel, or the unofficial start of summer. It is a time to stop and remember. We stop to remember those who never came home, the ones who gave up every tomorrow so that we could have ours. And we stop to remember the families they left behind, especially the Gold Star families we have here with us today. You carry a weight that few can understand. And while we can never repay what your loved one gave, we can promise this: we will not forget. Gold Star families are not defined by a patch, a flag, or a designation. They are defined by love. A deep, enduring love for a soldier who never came home. And they do it with strength, grace, and a kind of courage that humbles all of us who continue to serve. They are part of our Army family. They have sacrificed more than most of us ever will. And our duty to them does not end with when the final notes of taps fade away. We owe them more than ceremonies. We owe them our presence and support, because their sacrifice didn't happen in isolation. It happened for our freedom. This country can never fully repay them, but we can make one promise, that they will never carry it alone. When we speak of our fallen heroes, some speak in numbers, but those that we remember today were not numbers. They were sons and daughters, teammates and leaders. They had favorite songs, inside jokes, and future plans. They were scared sometimes, but always brave. They stood watch in places most Americans will never see. They faced down threats most will never know, and they made a decision to run toward the sound of the fight when others might have turned back. They didn't die because they were fearless. They died because they believed in a calling that is bigger than themselves. There is no greater love than that. They believed in the idea that freedom is worth defending, that someone had to stand the line. Today, that line is held by the American soldier. Make no mistake, they all joined the military for different reasons, but the primary reason was because they know that without them and people like them, this country and our way of life would cease to exist. And across our Army, from the front lines to the training grounds, their legacy is alive. Every time soldiers lace up their boots, lead from the front, or sharpen their craft, they honor the ones who no longer can. We don't remember these heroes with words alone. We remember them through how we serve, through discipline, toughness, and readiness. Through the quiet moments we get right, not because it's easy, but because they would expect us to. At JRTC in Fort Johnson, this isn't just theory, it's practice. Here, soldiers train under pressure and units build lethalities. Soldiers are tested. Every repetition, every after-action review, and every hard lesson learned, forged in these woods, ensure that the United States Army remains the most feared and capable fighting force in the world. That is how we honor their legacy, not by standing still in grief, but by preparing those who will carry the flag next. We are their legacy, and in the United States Army, that legacy trains, leads, and stands ready every single day. Today, you will hear us honor 96 soldiers from Fort Johnson who made the ultimate sacrifice during Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. Because JRTC and Fort Johnson played a central role in training and deploying soldiers in both of these conflicts, we will never forget the sacrifices of these soldiers. Just like we will never forget the heroes who trained here over the years and fought and were lost in far-off lands like Europe, Korea, and Vietnam. Their names, their stories, their sacrifices, they still matter. They matter to this formation, to this post, and to this nation, and they always will. General Colin Powell once said, "The nation owes a debt to its fallen heroes that we can never fully repay, but we can honor their sacrifice, and we must." So let's honor them by how we live, how we lead, and how we serve. Let's make sure that their legacy is not just remembered, but lived, because their sacrifice is not just history, it is our charge. May God bless our military and our families, and may God bless the United States of America.
Tragically, a total of 96 soldiers from Fort Johnson have lost their lives in Iraq and Afghanistan since 2003. Today, we remember the following soldiers who either served at Fort Johnson or fall within Fort Johnson's area of responsibility and pay the ultimate sacrifice during Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom so that we might be free. We honor the memory of these heroes with a solemn roll call. From 2003, Specialist Cedric L. Lennon. Corporal Tomas Sotelo, Jr. Private First Class Corey L. Small. Specialist Zefrino E. Colunga. Specialist Levi B. Kinchin. Private First Class Sean A. Silva. Staff Sergeant Christopher W. Swisher. Staff Sergeant Linda C. Jimenez. Private Ray D. Cuervo. From 2004, Staff Sergeant Craig Davis. Sergeant Patrick S. Tainch. Private First Class William C. Ramirez. Private First Class Clayton W. Henson. Private First Class Marquise A. Whitaker. Private First Class Michael A. Mora. Specialist Robert L. Dusang. Staff Sergeant Gina R. Sparks. Sergeant Andrew W. Brown. Corporal Corey M. Hewitt. First Lieutenant Christopher W. Barnett. Sergeant Craig L. Nelson. From 2005, Staff Sergeant Christopher J. Babin. Sergeant Bradley J. Bergeron. Sergeant First Class Kurt J. Como. Sergeant Huey P. Fassbender III. Sergeant Armand L. Fricky. Sergeant Warren A. Murphy. Staff Sergeant William F. Manuel. Staff Sergeant Robert W. Sweeney III. Sergeant Brett D. Swank. Sergeant Michael S. Evans II. Sergeant Christopher J. Ramsey. Staff Sergeant Jonathan R. Reed. Sergeant Seth R. Trahan. Staff Sergeant Nicholas J. Oliver. Sergeant Paul M. Hetzel. Sergeant Lee M. Godbolt. Sergeant Isaiah J. Sinclair. Second Lieutenant Clifford V. Gadsden. Sergeant Robin V. Fell. Sergeant Bernard L. Simbly II. Sergeant First Class Peter J. Hahn. Sergeant David J. Murray. Private First Class Christopher R. Kilpatrick. Sergeant Howard P. Allen. Corporal Jeremiah W. Robinson. Major Marino G. David, Jr. Sergeant Marshall A. Westbrook. 2006, Staff Sergeant Brian A. Lewis. Staff Sergeant Andrews J. Contreras. Sergeant Robert P. Casson. Staff Sergeant Robert J. Chiomento. Corporal Jason A. Lucas. Sergeant Kenneth E. Bostic. Sergeant Carlos E. Purnell. Sergeant Michael D. Rowe. Corporal Andy D. Anderson. From 2007, Sergeant Jason A. Schumann. Sergeant Austin D. Pratt. Private Danron A. Smith. 2008, Sergeant Timothy M. Smith. Sergeant Joseph A. Richard III. Sergeant Marcus C. Mathis. Sergeant Mark A. Stone. Specialist Jeffrey F. Nichols. Sergeant First Class David R. Hurst. Private Janelle F. King. Staff Sergeant Matthew J. Taylor. From 2009, Staff Sergeant Carlo M. Robinson. Sergeant Ricky D. Jones. 2010, Private First Class Devin J. Harris. First Lieutenant Scott F. Milley. Sergeant Edward H. Bolin. From 2011, Private First Class Ira B. Lanningham. Sergeant Ethan C. Harden. Specialist Omar Sotero. Specialist Rudolph L. Hizen. Specialist Christopher G. Stark. Staff Sergeant Chauncey R. Mays. Sergeant Travis M. Tompkins. Sergeant Keith T. Buzinski. Private First Class Brandon T. Pickering. Private First Class Jonathan M. Villanueva. Staff Sergeant Matthew D. Hermanson. Private First Class Carlos A. Aparicio. Private First Class Cody G. Baker. Specialist Nicholas P.W. Bernier. Sergeant Rafael E. Bigay Baez. Specialist Richard C. Emmons III. Staff Sergeant Michael J. Garcia. Specialist Dennis James Jr., Private First Class Gil I. Morales Deval, Sergeant Christopher P. Soderland, First Lieutenant Andres Zermeno, Specialist Adrian G. Mills. From 2017, Specialist Alexander W. Missildine. From the surrounding community soldiers, Sergeant Adam Wilkinson, Sergeant Stefan Smith, Sergeant Alcala Floyd, Captain Aaron Istri, and Staff Sergeant George Drawn. On thy graves, the rain will fall from the eyes of a grateful nation. Your legacy lives on in the lives you touched while you walked among us. We will never forget. At this time, soldiers from Alpha Battery 525 Field Artillery Battalion, led by Captain Matthew Wormuth and Staff Sergeant Cody Brown, will fire the salute. The salute will be followed by the sounding of taps by Specialist Anil Karki and the raising of the national colors to full staff by Specialist Ed Pacheco Mata, both serving with the 32nd Hospital Center. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand as we render honors. All veterans are authorized to render the hand salute. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our Memorial Day ceremony. Thank you for attending, and let us never forget.